Welcome back, everybody, to Breakthroughs with Bre, where we are having breakthroughs about our personal and spiritual development journeys, all in pursuit of the most authentic, joyful, blissful lives that we would want to live. My name is Bre. I'm an Akashic Records channeler, energy healer, astrologer, and personal and spiritual development coach. And today on this podcast, I'm so excited because we're going to be talking about relationships, dating, marriage, all the juicy stuff. We have a Q&A format, and I think you guys are really going to like it. So let's get into it. All right, everybody, we have a very special guest today, a friend of mine, somebody I've worked with as a client, somebody that is just the most radiant energy. You're going to see exactly what I mean. Today, we have Tina Pruitt on the podcast, who is a Reiki 2 practitioner and a success and accountability coach for the Adrenal Recovery Collective. Welcome, Tina, to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm so excited. We've been waiting a while for this, haven't we?
Yes, we have. And thank you for teeing that up because how this episode came to be is Tina and I have been talking about doing an episode since I started the podcast. But
Mhm.
the way that I feel about episodes and especially guests coming on is like I get this feeling when I know what it's going to be
Mhm.
about. And I'll have these kind of like brainstorming, like maybe it could be this or maybe it could be that. And I just kind of sit on it until I feel like that's it or yes, it's the time. So that had kind of been happening with Tina. She recently got a reading from the wonderful Mystic Michaela,
Mhm.
and she was telling our like little group through Mystic Michaela about it. And Mystic Michaela had said in the reading, like when she was looking at pictures of Tina and her husband, like, oh, you guys should have like a relationship podcast or like do relationship coaching or something. Like you guys have such a great vibe. And I was like, that's
That's
it.
it.
Tina and I are doing an episode on relationships. I've been wanting to do this episode for so long. And hearing that and just knowing Tina, I'm like, oh, she's the one. We're doing it.
Aw, thank you. I think it's perfect too. When you said that night, I was like, oh, this is the one. This is the one.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
something we both um enjoy talking about. We think is really
Yeah.
important. And
Yeah.
I
We've
just
had a
feel
lot
like
of conversations about it.
yes, we have. So I'm
Mhm.
so excited, but that will come later. We're going to do a little bit of like a Q&A
Okay.
format. So we're going to get all your guys' burning questions answered about relationships, dating, marriage, all of the things. But before we get into that, Tina, you know what I usually like to ask my guests, like to
Mhm.
learn a little bit about you. You know, your big three, human design, personality test, aura colors. So take the floor to tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. Well, I'm a Scorpio sun, a Scorpio rising, and a Sagittarius moon. I have a purple and blue aura. And I was really excited when I had my aura reading because she said, I know I give purples a lot of, grief sometimes, but she said, your purple is really calm and serene and organized. And she said, your colors are very lucid. There's a lot of clarity. So that was really exciting to me. She said, you've been doing the work and you can tell, which I loved. In human,
Wow, what a
yeah, right.
compliment to a purple. Oh my goodness.
That's what I said. And I have, I have done a ton of work the last 2 years, especially. So
Mhm.
in human design, I'm a 5/1 projector. And that has been just, incredible to learn.
Mhm.
Changed everything for me. I'm like, oh, this makes so much sense. In the Enneagram, I am a 2 wing 3.
Me too.
And
I love that. Of
I,
course we are.
yeah. And my Hogwarts, I'm a Ravenclaw.
Love it.
Yep. I was shocked, but I did it a couple times and I'm a Ravenclaw. So
I kind of see that. And the blue too is the color
yeah.
of the Ravenclaw house. So that
Oh,
kind of fits.
yeah. The curiosity, I think there were some other things in there. I
The
was like, oh,
inquisitiveness. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
mhm.
yeah. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, I love that. Okay. You said that finding that out that you were a 5/1 projector changed a lot. Will you tell me? I'm just curious, like what were some of like the really big ahas that came from learning you were a 5/1 projector?
So learning about the invitation, right? That
Yeah.
we needed to wait for an invitation. And I think my whole life, I'm a very outgoing person. I really like people. I like talking to them. Um, Part of my 5/1, my design is also that I'm a problem solver,
Yep.
but not everybody wants their problem solved.
Yep.
And I didn't know that because to me, I thought you're having a problem, it's not working. And I could see very clearly what would solve that problem. And, so then spent a lot of my years like this, hitting like brick walls, mostly with people that I was very close to, you know,
Hmm.
could never understand that. And so learning that I have to wait for the invitation has been, yeah, and what the invitation is.
Yeah.
But it isn't just them saying, oh, come tell me, but it's the openness, right? The inviting
Yeah.
you in a relationship, the trust, that they're ready to hear it as well. There's a lot of things to it. And then
Yeah.
also that I used to always think that I knew stuff instantly, like that gut feeling, I would get it instantaneously. But I didn't trust it. I would always overthink it. But I've learned that, being a splenic projector, you
Mhm.
do get that instantaneous hit. And that is the answer. And I have followed that for 2 years, and it has been right on every single time. So,
Wow.
yeah.
One of the things that I love about your story, and I hope you feel comfortable with me bringing this, and I feel like you
Whatever
will.
you want to tell, whatever.
One of the things that I admire so much about Tina's story, and I think a lot of us could relate to, is I hear so many times from my clients and in the world this pressure about finding the right path, or is it too late? You know, that whole concept.
Yeah.
And what I just find so enchanting about Tina's story is that her work, even doing, Reiki practitioner work and learning about spirituality and, coming into this version of her authenticity that she's
Mhm.
so beautifully embodying right now, that's not something that happened 20, 30, 40 years ago. You
No.
know, that's something that's happened in a different phase of your life than most
Mhm.
people think is possible or like would imagine happening. I don't know if you want to take a minute to talk about that because I think that's something that's really like unique and inspiring about you. So, and I want you to know that one, and two, I think the listeners um would benefit from hearing a little bit about that from your perspective.
Well, I really appreciate that because my whole life, and I mean from the time I was very small, I've always had this draw to know what my purpose was. Um, for me, just me as a person, what was I supposed to do so that I could be the best person I could be, right? But I was 60 years old before I figured it out. And um, when it's I think I spent most of my life trying to make everyone else happy. I don't think, I know. I spent most of my life trying to make everyone else happy and do what was acceptable to everyone, especially the people that I loved, my family. But for me, it extended outward to friends and acquaintances. And I just worried about what everyone thought all the time. And, I'm not doing anything fancy. I have like 8 or 10 Reiki clients that I just adore. It's as big as I want my Reiki practice to be. And I was really ill. So just a quick step back, I was really ill for 21 years, like debilitatingly ill. And I met the people that I work for now, the Adrenal Recovery Collective. And that right at that time was when I started coming into my own. I started learning to quiet myself, to quiet my soul, to listen, to pay attention to um, the voice that I was hearing, right? My own voice, even. And it's been a beautiful journey because I am so calm. I feel so calm and peaceful. And I feel like now when I do things, I'm making an impact. I'm
Mm,
not just throwing it out there and hoping it lands somewhere. I think you had said to me, it was almost like spitting out flowers that were growing in a field
mm,
when we had one of our one session. And I thought that was so beautiful. Like that's how it feels to me because
mm,
I'm learning to wait. I'm learning to put the information in the right hands,
mhm,
right? Not sharing everything. I used to just overshare all the time. And
mhm,
I've learned to just keep it back. And so, in the job that I do, working with people who are ill like I was, it's so interesting to be able to share with them that there is a different path, right? There's a different path. Here it is. And
wow.
yeah.
My
And it's
heart feels so
62, right?
moved.
I'm 62 and I have so much ahead of me and I'm so excited about that.
Mm, like my heart feels so moved as you talk about that. Whew, I really truly love it. And what I hear you saying, especially talking about how You were really locked into like a fawning trauma response, like a
Hmm.
very people
Yeah.
pleaser. Like I can't really, what's underneath that is like I can't stand the thought of like the chance that maybe somebody's upset with me or
Yeah.
like I'm guilty of
Oh,
something or people being in any kind of discomfort around me,
yeah.
like unable to tolerate that,
Right.
right? Which
Right.
is a reflection of other stuff, but it
Right.
fuels us to go into that, let me appease everything you
Right.
might think and need at
Right.
total expense of what
And
I
my
might
own,
need.
yeah.
hmm
And
And
yeah.
for you to like what you articulated is now wait to put your energy to places. One, it's waiting to put it with people who value what you
Yeah.
have to offer.
Yeah.
And that is a reflection of you valuing what you have to
Hmm.
offer.
Yeah.
Like, what you have is important. It's not better or worse than anybody else. It's not anything like that, but it
Right.
is, there's meaning behind it. There's
Hmm.
intention, there's purpose in what you
Yeah.
give. And it kind of like squanders the magic of what you have to give if you're just so anxiously like shooting it out and
Hmm.
you don't have anything left for the places that you were always meant to give it, you know? So it feels like you recognizing the inherent value of yourself
Yeah.
and therefore what you have to offer places when you meet them.
Yeah.
And like being very intentional and following your heart and your gut and your soul and your intuition about what places are actually in alignment, what places will
Hmm.
actually value that energy from you so
Yeah.
that you don't have to be locked in that pattern of struggle and anguish anymore.
Right. Because that was really my whole life was, you know, I spent my whole life being the good girl, right? That was my role, to be the happy girl and the good girl. Because, who gets upset with you when you're happy and you're good? But guess what? People do get upset with you and you're happy and good. And then you're thinking, well, what's wrong? What did I do wrong? And I've so left that girl behind. Um, there's still moments of her. She still comes up. In fact, right now, she's coming up right now, what will some people think? But I know who I am. I know what I believe. I know what I value. I know what's important to me. I know how I live my life. And I like who I am. I'm very happy with who I am. So,
Again, that just like makes my heart
yeah.
squeeze.
Yeah.
Um, the last thing I'll say before we jump into our stuff is I was doing a gratitude meditation. I want to share this with everybody. And at the end of the meditation, I felt moved to end it with, I'm grateful to be me. And here are some of the phrases that I said because this feels connected to what you just said. And I really want everybody to hear this and feel this, maybe repeat this to themselves. I am grateful for me. I am grateful to be me. I am grateful that I get to live this incarnation in this body as this version of myself. I'm grateful I get to do this go around the earth as this person.
Hmm.
I am so grateful to be me versus anybody else. I'm grateful for me. I'm grateful to me. Like I am grateful for me. I'm grateful to be me. All right, everybody, we're getting to the good stuff. We're going to talk about relationships, dating, marriage, all of the good things. Um, I am feeling called to letting the guides share some things to start off with before we get into the Q&A. So I'm going to ask them live here right now. Guides, how would you like us to start this off? What kind of information would you like everybody to hear as like we get the ball rolling for this wonderful, fun conversation? Mm. Okay, so it feels like what they're saying is we'd like everybody to like ponder, to remember that relationships are actually a place of great joy
Hmm.
in this human experience. A lot of people have really important contracts and purposes in regards to relationships, and this is to bring more joy and love and peace and growth into their life experience.
Hmm.
There can be a lot of fear around relationships, a lot of judgment, a lot of shame. Um, And we understand why this happens. Relationships are also very powerful containers for growth and very potent mirrors to reflect
Mhm.
back some healing and even some parts of our shadow that we've been hesitant to see or to acknowledge. And so this can make them feel difficult. Um, but even that is a gift to expand into love. And ultimately, finding one of your divine life partners is a great joy.
Mhm.
Um, there was something else. What is the other thing you wanted to share? Yeah, we'd like everybody to consider listening to this in an energy of joy, in an energy of excitement, in an energy of openness and wonder, and like I wonder what wonderful things are going to come through. It can be very easy to listen to things like this from the ego mind who
Mhm.
wants to think critically of yourself or of others as a way to protect you, and that is not needed. That's not
Mhm.
needed for today. None of this is to judge anybody. None of this is to tell you what you're doing wrong, because that kind of doesn't exist from our perspectives. So we invite you to like just put that down, to let that relax down, and to just listen with an open heart and see how what comes through today can help you feel and love more deeply. Ooh, that was beautiful.
Mhm.
Thank you so much, guys. Is there anything else you want us to know? Okay, that's for later. Okay, cool. Ah. Okay, so what question would you like us to start with, guys? Um, Okay, they're asked that this is what it feels like they want us to start with, Tina, is what is our favorite thing about being able to be in relationship to people? And this can be not just specific to like romantic relationships, but maybe even like friendships or family members. Like maybe like what is one or two things that we think is one of the most beautiful things about being able to be in relationship to people?
I think the two words that come to my mind are comfort
Mm,
and community. And
mm,
community can be between two people, right? So it's a sense of belonging. I think
mm,
that's probably a better word than community, a sense of belonging and comfort that you are not the only one. You're not alone, right?
mm.
And when I
I
think
love
about
that.
my friends, my girlfriends, I have that. When I think about my husband, I have that,
Mm,
and those are the two main relationships in my life, right?
mm-hmm. Oh
So
my gosh, I love that. Let me see if I have if I have anything coming through to add to that. Greatest joy of relationships. I think that there's something really beautiful about there's like a ooh, what is the word for that? Like when energy kind of bounces off of each
mhm,
other and how like
yeah,
the sum is greater than the parts, you
yeah,
know? About the kind like the way that we vibrate when we're in true authenticity and like the joy of that. Like think about just
mhm,
like giggling with somebody
yeah,
when you're just
yeah,
being like really silly or weird or something, and the kind of exhilaration that comes from being
yes,
so vulnerable,
yeah.
like
And safe
yes, and
and safe.
safe and 100% safe.
Yeah.
Like to have that feeling be magnified because you're
Mhm,
like reflecting it off of each
yeah,
other, I think is some of the like most magnificent magic. I think that the souls that choose to incarnate as humans, whether they've been humans before or maybe not, I think that's part of what they want to be able to experience because it is so incredible. It's so
mhm,
it's just something not to be taken for granted for
yeah,
at all. Just like it's almost like an ecstasy a little bit of like
yeah,
really being able to see that beauty of the authenticity and the joy of that in another person and for
mhm,
them to see it in you and to just have that moment where you're totally connected and reflect
yeah.
like I just that's just something that's incredibly powerful.
It is powerful. And, I think I've thought a lot about this the last month. I've spent most of my life um, searching for belonging. That has been like the thing that has kind of been missing in my life is like not feeling like I belonged. And I've looked back over the decades of my life, and that has been consistent with me. I don't feel that way anymore. And I've been trying to figure out what that is for me. And I don't know where I heard it. I wish I could give credit, but fitting in is about editing yourself to be what other people need you to be.
Mm.
But belonging is being somewhere where you're accepted for exactly who you are. Okay, there it goes.
The tears.
But this has been a lifelong hole in my life. Is that not that I haven't been loved, and my family loves me dearly, and my friends have loved me dearly, but I have not ever, maybe for myself, I've always felt like I had to be someone else to be lovable, right? For them to accept me or to fully embrace me, I had to chin up, happy girl, don't rock the boat, don't be different, don't voice my questions, because even as a child, I've had so many questions about things, and not from my parents, not from my parents, but outside of that, a lot of resistance to me asking questions. And I heard that on your podcast. People don't want to hear the questions. And I understand now that that triggered a lot of people. And so I would see that it triggered people, so that then I would just, and then I would go.
And for anybody
And
just watching,
inside,
she covered her mouth and then
yeah.
smiled. So she silenced
Oh, yeah,
herself
that's right.
and then masked up. So yes,
Yeah,
but
and
please
masked up.
continue.
Yeah. So it was very, it was very eye-opening to me, because when we're talking about relationships with my husband, I don't have to mask up ever, ever. Yeah.
And I have a question for you too. Um, getting to this place where you feel such deep peace and love in your life and really having this aha moment about what it means to fit in versus
Mhm.
belong. Do you think that that was also a reflection of your own like ability inside of yourself to be able to belong and to just be with yourself? Do you think
Yes.
that there was like a connection? Did one have to happen before the other? Like, what was your experience with like being able within your own walls of who Tina is to be able to say exactly as I am is accepted and I don't need myself to be different. And then also being able to attract, however you want to say, those kinds of people that were a reflection of that dynamic too.
I love that question. So I have a friend, her name is Dorothy, and she is a Hygge, Hygge. She's a Hygge expert. And I met her online, and we became great friends, and spent some time with her, talking with her. And she really helped me to kind of find a comfort in just who I was, and I was still at the point when I met her, I was still really sick. Really, really, I was going into burnout. So I needed the kind of that comfort and a place to, because I had, after 21 years of being ill, to be honest with you, you really lose who you are. You really don't know how to identify yourself other than as someone who's sick, you know. And I wanted to be somebody different, but every time I tried to be different, I just got sicker and sicker. So then one day, when I found Know Your Aura podcast, and I was so sure that I was indigo and yellow. I remember that. And but as I read it and I read about it, and then I got quick confirmed that I was purple and blue. Like, my friends, I know, they just think I'm crazy sometimes because I talk about aura colors all the time. But the thing that I learned was, I learned who I was. And it wasn't that I looked at what a person who has a purple and blue aura, I didn't look at that and say, oh, that's who I am, I'm going to be that person. As I started to let go of the things that weren't me, I could see the purple and the blue personality come out of me. And
Mm,
I could go, oh, that's what that is. Oh, that victim blue. I lived in that for a really long time. Oh, that's why these things started happening for me. And I rebelled, be honest with you. I rebelled against both. I rebelled against the purple and the blue because I didn't want to be either one of those. I didn't think they were, I don't know. I just didn't think they were the right ones for me.
mhm.
But it turns out they've helped me to accept my personality and to be who I am. and to understand that it's okay to have a really good heart, but everybody isn't going to like that heart, and that's okay, because it's mine, it's my personality, and it's who I am. It's okay to be a little bit woo-woo, to have a little bit of mystical thoughts. I've had these things I've known about myself since I was a tiny girl. I mean, like very, very young. But just, oh, that's not something that we ever talk about, right?
Mhm.
So I don't know, for me, it was learning about them, about learning about how a purple and a blue aura person, kind of meanders through the world, and how you do things, and purple bombs, right? Oh, I've thrown some big purple bombs. And I don't know, that was the start for me, was just to kind of go, okay, I'm going to let go of all the things I thought I was, and I'm going to just pay attention to what brings me peace.
Mhm.
And that's really been a struggle for me. It's been a
Mhm.
hard, it's been a hard journey, but it's been a beautiful journey, and I feel so good. And then I discovered human design. And, I don't know, I'm not an expert about it, but I know about myself. And I know that that explained me to me. It made so much sense. It opened my eyes like big and wide. And I saw that as I put my children in to see what their human design was, and my husband and my parents and some of my friends, and I'm like, it is spot on every time. So
Mhm.
I could really pay attention to that. And the beauty of that is that it has helped me let go of things for myself, and it has changed what were unreasonable expectations that I was putting on other people. Does
Mm.
that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. And because of letting go of those expectations of other people, that gives them the freedom to belong, to be themselves. They don't have to try to fit in when they're with me, because I don't have those unrealistic expectations anymore. Because I used to have a way I thought life was supposed to go. I have a way that I thought dinner with the family was supposed to look like, or a gathering was supposed to look like. And so I would always leave everything with my feelings hurt or disappointed because I didn't get it right. I didn't do it right. I didn't make everybody happy, or whatever. And now I don't do that anymore. I didn't do it
Mm.
purposely. I did it out of a lack of knowledge, right?
Mm.
And understanding that I could just be myself, and that was okay.
Mm.
And if it wasn't enough for somebody, that's okay too. You
Mm.
just don't need to be in the inner circle,
Mm.
you know?
I feel like my guides want to say a little bit on this, because you've so beautifully described something that feels really important about developing a relationship with self and how that can impact relationship with other people, because really there's a direct, it's more,
Yeah. Yeah.
it is so much more connected than you might realize.
Than we ever realized,
It
right?
is a direct
Mhm.
correlation
Yeah.
between your relationship with yourself. And I'm not just talking about the parts of yourself you like. I'm talking about the entirety of who you are.
Yeah.
That relationship is mirrored,
Right.
magnified in the relationships you have with every person in your
Right.
life. And if you've never thought about it that way and looked at relationships and dynamics that happened as like a clue for
Right.
how you're relating to yourself, it can be a mind-blowing thing. But let me ask the guys, because it definitely felt like they wanted to say something. Take the stage, guys. What would you like to add to this? Hmm. I said thank you, Tina, for sharing this so beautifully. Yeah, they're saying that this is so important, and it's the journey of every soul to come to know itself, to come to know itself. And
Mhm.
there's a different timeline for how everybody does this.
Mhm.
So again, on the note of like releasing shame and judgment, not only of yourself, but like expectations of when others should do it. It's not a game of like how soon can you do it? Because then you've
Right.
got it figured out sooner. It's like letting the natural things unfold. Because the moments that you uncover it are perfect.
Mhm. Yes.
especially when you're being really conscious with yourself and you're just letting life unfold.
Yeah.
So, but this journey of like, how can you know yourself more deeply is very important.
Mhm.
What else? What was the other thing you wanted to say on this? Yeah, they're saying the part of the sort of paradox of being human is the way that the human mind, the ego mind, creates expectation for things
Mhm.
as a way to gauge if you're being good or not, which is really an extension of are you safe or not. Um, and the more you can become aware of where you have expectations and how you can like release your grip on them and learn how to just allow and surrender to things, like actually consciously, intentionally allow without judgment to accept, um, the more you release anguish, is what they're
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah.
They're saying that this is very much within yourself, and even to do things like mask or, try and only be certain versions of yourself or, whatever, like that's a form of you imposing expectations on yourself. The way that you relate to quote unquote shadow elements of yourself, which by that we mean parts of yourself that you're ashamed of, parts of your human experience that your culture is labeled as bad, maybe things about your sexuality or your anger or like whatever it might be, um, experiences that were filled with fear or pain, because pain is also considered and been labeled shadow in our culture, right? Like even your expectation of how those should and should not be a part of who you are and how much they should or should not be a part of your experience and your expectation of if they should or should not be accepted, and allowed in the unfolding of who you are. This is also another place where we create anguish within ourselves, which really just kind of it kind of gets us like out of the energy of love,
Yeah.
right? Um, and the more that we can learn how to face and meet these parts of ourselves and learn how to allow them, which is really loving them, the more we can also come into external circumstances and just allow them, even if they're filled with those things that again are labeled shadow or difficult or bad. And this expand, it's almost like the runway for love gets bigger, right?
Mhm.
Like when there's expectation, we're like narrowing the window, like
Yeah.
narrowing the street that love can drive on.
Yeah.
And when we can allow and find a way to tolerate and accept some of these,
Mhm.
like we're like widening the street, the runway that love can come through. And that experience can just be very different. So again, they just wanted to say thank you to Tina for um of sharing an anecdote that mirrors that really well. Wonderful. Okay, let's keep going into um some questions.
All right.
So, oh, it feels like there's one they want us to go to before this one I have written down. Oh, what do you want us to talk about on that? They're saying they want us to talk about the concept of loneliness a little bit.
Oh boy.
I know. I'm like, wow, what a juicy thing. What do you want us to talk about on that? Or like how would you like us how would you frame the question to us? They said, we think it would be helpful for you to share like short examples of how, of the times that loneliness might have been the motivation for the start or the continuation of certain relationships.
Yeah.
Or like how loneliness played a factor in that. Even just like a couple quick observations about that, we think would be helpful. So either you can go first or I can, Tina.
You can go first. I need a minute. It's a very vulnerable place, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Um, my, oh, thank you for that. It dropped in another thing that I was wanting to talk about at some point in this. I have observed, and I feel like my soul remembers a lot of wisdom on this particular thing I'm going to say, that relationships oftentimes can be where you play out a lot of self-worth issues.
Mhm.
You got to be real careful of that because a lot of the triggers or issues or things that like problems you have in relationships oftentimes can you just be projecting like your fears that you're not good enough or like you're not lovable
Yeah.
or like your own fear about being abandoned or rejected.
Yeah.
And I think loneliness in itself is is when you are in an experience where maybe you're perceiving you're not in relationship with somebody and you're afraid that that confirms that you're not lovable.
Mhm.
And because you're afraid that this situation is like confirming your worst fear about you, it like sets you into this whole agitated state that we call loneliness.
Yeah.
Um, that creates actions that are really driven from fear, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, because really the state of maybe not being in direct relationship or interaction with somebody, like there's nothing wrong with that, you know?
Right.
Like being in different phases of solitude or having different degrees in which your space around you is either filled with yourself or maybe filled with other
Right.
people. Like that, like there's nothing inherently good or bad about that. It's a very neutral and it ebbs and flows in life the way that it feels to me and it's being shown to me right now. So I think really what loneliness is again is it's kind of like salt in a wound. The
Yeah.
experience is poking at this Achilles heel where you're afraid that it's confirming that you're not good enough to be in relationship. You're afraid that it's confirming the fear that you have that you might not ever find somebody because you're not worthy of being loved or something. Like, you know, like really what it is tapping in on that. And it's not really about the experience of not being in relationship with people. And you just always got to be mindful of when you're making decisions based on fear. Because
Yeah.
everything that plays out after that, it's just going to echo back. It's ultimately going to confirm your fear.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
if your intention behind things is what creates what comes back.
Yeah.
So if you don't want to have an experience that like
Yeah.
reflects back to you, I'm not worthy of
Yep.
being loved and I'm going to be abandoned, then like maybe just, you know, give yourself a little grace and compassion and observe where you might be making actions from the fear that that might be true. So
Yeah.
that's my 2 cents on it.
Wow. Well, I've committed to being honest and brutally honest in this conversation. Didn't expect it to go here, but I think it is important. So, I grew up in a really strong faith-based household. I felt very loved as a child. I felt very loved as a teenager. Um, I thought that when I got married, that I would feel complete, right? I would feel loved. I was very lonely inside of my first marriage.
Mm,
And sadly, it's taken me a lot of years to realize that my husband was really lonely inside of our marriage too.
mm,
But I didn't know that at the time. All I could feel was my own loneliness, right?
mm,
So here was two young kids. Really, we were kids, early 20s. We loved each other dearly, but we just couldn't figure it out. And we were both so lonely inside of our relationship. And because we weren't able to work it out, um, we ended up getting divorced and we had two children. So here I am at 36 years old. The two things that I wanted in my life was to be a wife and a mom. The most important things. I'd failed at the first one. And then I lost both my children and they lived with their dad. And you talk about loneliness.
mm,
It was devastating.
mm,
And how can you be? I couldn't see myself as anything but a failure because the three most important people in my life I had failed.
mm.
And it's taken me decades to, sorry, it's taken me decades to get past that, and to be able to um, be myself in those relationships. Um, I just got back from a week at my daughter's, and she said something to me that was so precious. And she said, Mom, you were a young mom who didn't know any better. You know, you didn't know. And we were kids who didn't know. And I can add to that. They had a dad that didn't know. I had a husband that didn't know. We didn't have anybody telling us how to manage what was happening in our lives. There was no one. stepped in, and said, Dave, Tina, you could do better with this. And so, what is it? It was 1996. All these years later, we've never had a birthday party with our grandchildren. We've never had, joint parties with our kids. It's just been this separation that has created a tremendous amount of loneliness for my whole family, for my children and for my grandchildren, and so my goal now is to bring healing to that. I don't know how that will ever, if it will ever change my relationship with my ex-husband, but I'm working to make those changes with my grandkids and my kids. And then, being sick for 21 years, I wasn't lonely inside of those 21 years, but in those 21 years, I had all 7 of my grandchildren. So they only knew me sick. So when you're sick and you're debilitatingly sick, you don't get to do all those things that most Grammys, nanas get to do. And there's a loneliness to that. And I love those kids and they all love me so much, but I want to show them that they belong to me. I don't want them to feel that loneliness because my grandparents, I belonged to them, and I want my grandkids to feel that way.
I have a question for you on that.
Yeah.
Feels like I have a couple.
Sorry about the tears and the red nose.
There is no reason to apologize for feelings in this space or anytime you're around Bre.
Those are things I've rarely said out loud. I don't say those things out loud. So
well, if you felt called to say them, that means they're going to have an impact on somebody listening. So thank you. And they've had an impact on me too. Having those experiences with loneliness, right? Having, for some reason, a part of your life path and however they came into it, how would you, I don't know if like define loneliness is quite the right word, but like, how do you understand what loneliness really is, or like what that experience really is after having those experiences?
For me, it's that not belonging. It is just not belonging. I don't know. I know for me that is, I felt like I wanted to belong to Dave so much because we loved each other. I mean, it ended badly. But we didn't go into it badly. We loved each other.
Love
We
is,
loved each
and
other.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I was just
That's
going to say
okay.
one of the things that I think is really cool about what you're saying is that sometimes love
It's not enough.
is not the same as belonging.
Exactly.
And that's not like I like to distinguish a little bit, like divine love, capital L, is so much bigger and more encompassing than like the way we talk about
Right.
like being
Right.
able to love each other through the
Right.
human experience. Like the humanness
Yeah.
distorts the love a little bit,
Right.
so even when you feel love,
Yeah.
it does not necessarily that like you are encompassing like the whole spectrum of what like
Right.
capital L love is.
Yeah.
So I think that's something really important to say and
Yeah.
to hear, is that sometimes our human experience of love can be sincere, but that does
Right.
not mean it's the same thing, like automatically the same thing as having true belonging with
Right.
whoever you are in that love relationship with.
Right. And I think that's it because I grew up understanding what God's love was for me. And, that's been I've kind of had a hard journey with that the last 20 years. But I know now that for me, I know what God's love is. I know that it's pure and it's whole and I expected that I just thought that's how it was going to be. Like I thought I was going to feel like I did with my mom and my dad, and with my grandparents and my aunties and uncles. My dad had 11 siblings. My mom had 6. They loved on us like crazy. I mean, cousins galore, wonderful people, and I always felt like I belonged to all of them. Right. But, boy, was it different, and that is that thing. It's that human love. And it's not hard. I thought it was going to be hard for me to say because I've held on to a lot of anger for my ex-husband. But as I've been preparing to talk with you, I knew I had to work through some of that. And I thought, when I see my kids, and I just saw my son and I just saw my daughter, and I see in them all the wonderful things that I loved about my first husband.
Mm,
You know, I
yeah.
see all his strengths and his silliness and the things that were just charming about,
Mhm,
that are just not were, are just charming about him,
mhm,
and um, we just didn't have the tools to make it
mhm.
work. We
Yeah.
just didn't. We would have, yeah, I know we both would have liked to have made it work, but we just,
Yeah.
you know, so
And
yeah,
if there's one thing I've seen in the Akashic records too, I just want to share is that sometimes relationships not working out is it's like it's not a matter of like you didn't figure it out to make it work. Yes, there are definitely elements of that to where like, you know, there's like humanness that comes into
yeah,
it that makes it sometimes a little messier than it needed to be. But like sometimes truly like relationships are only meant to be a season. And
yeah,
especially for people who have kids together, like sometimes the
yeah,
contract for the relationship is just to have the kids.
yeah,
It's not meant to be your divine life, your whole life partner. And it's like our attachment to things. And again, this fear that maybe a relationship not working out confirms that we're not
mhm,
lovable, or this fear that like we're going to get abandoned. Like it's that
yeah,
fear that keeps us holding on to things instead of sensing, like,
yeah,
does this feel right that this relationship is coming to a close? Like, does it really feel like the time? Because sometimes that's really what happens with
yeah,
relationships. And so again, that constant checking in
mhm,
with yourself, like what feels most right in this moment?
yeah,
Does it really feel like it's continuing to be in this type of relationship with this
yeah,
person, or does something feel like it's changing? You
yeah,
know, like that is actually like from the perspective of that I've been able to sort of like sense a little bit from the Akashic Records keepers and the guides, like there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. That's not an indication of failure. In
mhm,
fact, like if you were going to label things as success or failure, which is not how they look at it at all, but like it actually is a sign of you making really beautiful progress in your soul journey when you can honor wherever that's taking you, even if that does mean that a relationship shifts to a different
yeah,
version of itself and
yeah,
quote unquote ends. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah. And it's easier to see that when you have peace about yourself, right? So for me,
Ooh,
no one in my family, I think I had one of my cousins was divorced, and it was horrendous inside of our family. It was a horrendous event, not accepted well. She was not, and I love her dearly. And we've talked about this. It was very difficult for her, the judgment. And so there's all of that too, that
mhm,
plays in. And for me, it goes back to fitting in and belonging, right?
mm.
And
If
having and getting rid of the expectations that are unrealistic, you know.
Yep,
I don't want to get
I'm
ahead of
getting
myself, but that's really
yeah,
important. It's really
yeah.
important.
I feel like, and there's a reason we're talking about this, and it's funny because I definitely didn't have it in my notes, like
No, it's
talking
not in our
about
notes,
having,
is
no,
it?
and we said a prayer before this, like guide our presence to be of greatest service to everybody. So we're trusting wherever this
Right.
conversation going is exactly where people need to hear it. But this is something that's coming to me now. If you are either currently in a situation where a relationship might be heading towards a possible ending, or you're trying to make peace with a relationship that's ended in the past, exactly to what you just said, which was gold, that it's easier to have peace with it when you have peace with yourself.
Yep.
One of the questions that I like to ask myself to really get myself in that headspace to confirm like if like what my intuition's really saying, and this feels like a version of this question that could be specific to relationships, is if I was not afraid
Mm,
that I was unlovable, if I was not afraid that this relationship ending meant some sort of failure, if I was not afraid of being alone, if I was not afraid of being abandoned, if I did not think that this relationship had anything to do with my ability to be in a successful relationship or their ability to be in a successful relationship, right? Like if all of
mhm,
that was totally taken off the table and I knew that great things were going to happen for either one of us on the other side of
mhm.
this, no matter what it was, like what do I feel like I really want and what is really best for the
Yeah,
situation?
yeah, yeah,
Because again, it definitely feels like some of those things that like I mentioned in that question,
yep.
to yourself, end up clouding our ability to
Oh,
really be connected to our heart about
mhm,
what is the best path forward with this kind of relationship and to be able to allow it,
mhm,
accept it, and be in peace and not
yeah.
create more anguish that needs to be in the situation.
Because we hold on longer than we should many times.
Mhm.
Some people are quick to leave, right? and some people are hold on longer. And the thing is, if you're going to hold on, then fight for it in a healthy manner, right? Get the counseling, do the life coaching, know your aura colors. I'm telling you, if you know the aura colors, you will respond to people differently when you understand what their aura colors are, and you will stop expecting things from them that they aren't capable of doing, or that they're going to be able to do it in a different manner. I think that's more, not that they're not capable, but to understand what their language is, right? So just even understanding what are the love languages. So what are their personality language is the same. But knowing someone's aura color is really understanding their personality. That's all it is. It's understanding the way they interact with the world. The same as with human design. It's how you interact with the world and with yourself and with the world. And God, for me, I've literally in just the last few months come to for myself, understanding that that's how God made us. That's how we're made. We're not, that's how we're made.
I feel like my guides want to add one other thing on this. So you said, if you're going to hold on, and I also want to say, it doesn't feel true to glamorize one versus the other.
Right.
If we are going to call something the best is like being really connected to yourself and honoring what's true, period, no matter what that looks like. But if you do find yourself in the category of somebody who's like quote unquote holding on, also hold on to yourself.
Yes. Don't lose yourself in the middle of it.
Yeah, like in your desperation to hold on to the relationship, which again, when you reflect, like, are you holding on because you're afraid that letting it go would confirm all of these worst fears that you're, whatever, like, find a way to be honest with yourself about that, because that will expand your ability to love yourself. But also hold on to yourself. Hold on to yourself and hold on what you know is good and healthy and joyful and loving for you too. Because yes, doing the kind of self-awareness work that also will help you be more aware of your partner is always going to benefit you, whether you stay in that relationship or not. And all of the ways that Tina was just describing, understand your partner, of course, but like you have to understand yourself too, exactly like she was saying, like, where are your expectations of things really coming from? Where are your triggers really coming from? What are your needs? Oh, that's one of the biggest things I feel like we don't understand about ourselves. And is this a need that I need to meet? Or is this a need that they really like understanding your own internal landscape? I mean, biggest thing you can do for your whole self in your life anyway, but especially in relationships, like hold on to yourself too. And like, just don't forget that if you're in a thing where you're really trying to hold on, you're trying not to live with regrets, make sure you did your due diligence to try. I love that. Great. Don't live with
That's
regrets.
important.
Feel like you did everything that you could, but you're only half of the equation in a relationship, but you're 100% of the equation in your own life. So like, don't let go of you.
Yep, absolutely.
What's so funny about this is we have a bunch of questions, Q&A about like navigating, finding right relationships, but like I am really getting the sense from the guides that what people actually need to hear from us is a little bit more about navigating fears in relationships, and even how to find peace and navigating endings of relationships sometimes, that like people need a little bit more about this than they even do some of the other stuff. And don't worry, everybody, we were prepped to do a multiple part episode, so we're going to get to the other stuff too, but it feels like this is really important. This is something that people struggle a lot with. So I hear that, guides, and we're gonna surrender. We're gonna allow. We're gonna walk the walk here. What would you like us to speak to next? The guides are showing me that moment when you're technically still in the relationship, but you can feel all of the signs that it's coming to a close, and there's circumstances that you can't influence anymore. Ooh, I can feel like the pain of this in my chest. I feel like I'm really channeling into a lot of people having this experience who will be listening. You can feel all of the ways that you've tried, and maybe your partner has in their own way, but that there wasn't, it didn't produce the results that you wanted. Or maybe you have a partner who hasn't really tried. And no matter what you say or do, it does not change what they're capable or motivated to do in that moment. And you're trying to find a way through the pain of that to make a choice, either for yourself or maybe for you and your kids, on how to like move on and move forward. Like how to like move through that moment where you still feel that instinct to kind of like grip onto it or
Mhm.
stay attached to it, and how to take that moment of feeling that anguish
Mhm.
about how it's ending or that it might be ending, how to come to a place of acceptance about that in whatever way that you can, to be able to feel like you can move forward with as much peace as you can muster. Um, and I know your experience with your ex-husband, like that wasn't necessarily how you were able to navigate it at the time, but with
Listen.
the wisdom that you have from your experience and whatever's coming to you, because you're also extremely intuitive and connected and have your own very beautiful channel. What do you feel moved to offer to people who are in that moment?
So what came up for me first was I wish I had, and I'm sorry, I'm going to cry again. Boy, this is really vulnerable, isn't it?
You're healing
Um,
yourself right now by saying
yeah,
this. To be crying, and if anybody else is crying too,
yeah,
crying is an energetic healing. Your body is ready to release emotions you've been holding on to, and it's
a lot
giving
of
you an
years.
opportunity to release something that you don't have to hold on to anymore. So let yourself cry, give yourself in a safe space, allow, because you are literally giving your body and yourself a healing by letting yourself do that. So to both you,
It's so
Tina, and
true.
to anybody listening, give yourself a tissue and let it cry,
I
baby,
know,
you
just
know?
let it go. I wish, okay, so looking back for myself, looking back, even in the really dark times, I wish I had been able to remember why I loved him. Because when it got bad and when it got dark and when it was ending, I still loved him, but I couldn't remember why. I couldn't remember what it was about him because everything hurt so much. And I wish I could have realized that he was hurting too. And I'm telling you that this is literally about 9 days of realization for me. We got married in 1983. We divorced in 1996. And it's 2023. And I'm about 9 days into this
Mm.
because I knew we were going to talk about this. It just came up and I'm like, oh boy, I got to deal with this now. Right. So I wish I could have remembered the person that I loved and that I could have been, that I could have found some grace for him too. Right. Because I wanted grace. I wanted him to give me grace for my mistakes, but I did not give him grace for his.
Mm.
And um, I've learned a lot the last 20 months about 22 months about giving myself grace, right? That I need to do that, but I need to give it to other people too. And I wish that I had um, spoken up about what I needed instead of speaking up about what I thought everyone else was going to feel and think, right? I didn't know how to protect myself from all the onslaught of the fear of judgment and rejection and disappointment. And it isn't that, when we got divorced, no one's came to me and said, you're a failure. Not one person in my family said you're a failure. Not one person in, my friend circle um, came, but it was what I had learned, right?
Mhm.
Marriage is forever. It's forever, right?
Mhm.
Until I die. And so when you mess that up and that is your idea, of course, wouldn't it be wonderful if all of us could get married and it could last forever?
Mhm.
To me, I think that would be wonderful. If it could be happy and last your whole life, it would be great. But just isn't the way life is.
Mhm.
It just doesn't
Yeah.
always work that way. So I think I wish I could have remembered who he was. I wish I could have known who I was at the
Mm.
time. Um, I wish I'd gone for real help.
And was all of that, and were those things that you wish you could have done to be able to help save the relationship?
No, to
Or those
salvage
were,
us as people, to salvage
mm,
us and to salvage our children.
mm.
because I don't know that we could have salvaged the marriage. I don't
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
but we could have salvaged each other, and we could have
Mhm.
salvaged the children,
Mhm.
and we didn't.
Ooh,
We didn't have the tools. We didn't know where to go for them. I
yeah.
did go for help, but it was not help.
Yeah.
Like I've gotten like I got in, I had life coaching was very, very helpful. I learned a lot, but then this last one I worked with, Angela, I really learned a lot about, what real help is.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, for me, I prayed every day. I prayed and 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 I begged for help and begged for help. And that was the only thing I knew to do,
Mhm.
and there are people who will say that that's the best and the only thing to do, but that's not the only thing to do. You should, there's a lot of other things that you could do and learn. So I'm not
Yeah.
really sure how to answer that question. That's the best I've got for you.
And that's the perfect thing to say, for sure. Let me tap into it, guides. What would you want people in that situation to know? What guidance would you offer them? They're saying one of the biggest things you can do to give yourself peace is to notice when you are framing the situation um, with this possibility of getting it wrong or
Yeah.
failing, that
Yes.
that is just not true, that it's never true. There's never a moment that you're coming into and a way that things are playing out that is the wrong way or is failing. Like that's never it. And that's really being out of trust of yourself and with the universe when you believe that to be true. And that's because it's just not true.
Mhm.
Um, it feels like there's more. What's the other layer to that you want to be able to show people? Hmm. Yeah, they're saying when we cling to this idea that there's a one right way or one right path or one way to do it and anything else is a failure, we're clinging to these external markers of goodness because we don't trust our own goodness, our innate goodness, and we don't trust our own internal compass for goodness.
Right.
And so
Right.
we're using all these external um markers, indicators of it to try and substitute for our lack of connection, our lack of familiarity, or our lack of trust with our own inner goodness.
Yeah.
And they're saying that that's an offering to people to consider looking at how and where you might be doing that so that you can come back inside and get a sense for does this feel, even if it feels painful and even if it feels difficult, can I have peace
Yeah.
with what's happening, knowing that it's happening exactly for somehow
Yeah.
how it kind of should on
Yeah.
some levels.
Yeah.
And I want to exclude if you're like experiencing any physical violence or anything like that,
Right.
because
That's a whole different thing.
it's a whole nother thing. Um, you have the ability to remove yourself and resources to do that. And if you haven't really been able to, there's I know your guides would love to help you reflect on why and how you can get yourself into a really healthy place. But like where you're at can still be the perfect path for you,
Right.
like finding trust with
Yeah.
that.
Right.
Um, let's see, there feels like there's another thing here. Yeah, it feels like there's a lot of shame that gets generated and shame,
Yes.
it like, oh, this is interesting. They're showing me this visual of it almost. I don't know if anybody's ever watched Fringe, but there was this show Fringe. There was this like amber gas that would turn into a liquid around you and almost like turn you into like a insect in amber, like that
Oh,
sort of
okay.
thing. And they're showing me that shame is almost like it like freezes you
Yeah.
and
Yes.
it like you can't like you feel like you can't like move and flow through things,
Yep.
That's so funny that they're showing it to me that way. Anyway, you're generating shame within your own self.
Yep.
Some people have an addiction to feeling shame. So they have an addiction to the thought cycles and the situations that make them feel bad about themselves. And that was a learned thing.
Mhm.
So there's this, then they're also kind of addicted to feeling, maybe it's sorry for themselves or bad on themselves or feeling like, why me? And that's like a victim consciousness thing, which I'm going to do a whole episode about coming up. I'm so excited to do this. It's going to be so good. But yes, there's like it's sort of an addiction to staying in kind of like a disempowered, mindset. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason why that had happened, but you don't have to stay in that. But coming back to this moment of like we're in anguish, we're having a really hard time accepting
Yeah.
and trying to figure out how to move forward. Mm,
And the black and white thinking.
yeah,
Black and white thinking is really hard because it's either right or it's wrong, right? There's nothing in the middle. And I was raised with very black and white thinking. And that has led to a lot of shame and a lot of struggle,
yeah,
and I know so many other people, even in the coaching that I do with the Adrenal Recovery Collective, we see that how the shame has kept people stuck in their illness,
yeah,
you know, and weight gain and all these issues that you would never think it goes back to shame, but it
yeah,
does,
yeah,
so um yeah,
yeah. And something that I just said on a video and I had on a coaching call, and again, might be its own podcast, but if we look at pain and anguish not as a signal that like you're wrong or something went wrong or there's a problem or
right,
something like that, but what if that is an experience that invites you to learn how to love more?
yeah,
So maybe that's a question to ask yourself too. Like, how can I be more capital L love in this moment? Like,
mhm,
how is this situation challenging me and kind
right,
of like creating resistance, which produces growth for me to
right,
love more? Is it myself that I need to love more? Do I need to have a little bit more respect and value for myself in this situation? Do I need
yeah,
to show myself that I really value and love myself?
mm,
Right? Is that what this situation's really calling me to do? Is it to feel more grace?
yeah,
Then maybe that kind of like relaxes and dissipates a certain
mhm,
dynamic. Um, like it's going to be something unique for everybody.
yeah, it's all
Um,
different for all of us.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that kind of feels like that. I hope that that answers whoever somebody needed to hear that. So hopefully that helps answer that question for you. What is there anything else you wanted us to speak on this? Yeah, again, they're saying please, please consider what we said about how we project our fears about our own self-worth onto relationships, and that makes
We
them
do.
bigger and messier and harder than they're actually meant to be.
Yeah, it
Like,
creates the dysfunction,
yes,
right?
it distorts it. It
Yeah, it
distorts
does.
the whole situation.
Yeah,
So please reflect and consider on where and how you might be afraid that maybe you're not good enough for a healthy relationship, or
yeah.
places where you might be blaming yourself and
Mhm.
past versions of yourself for certain outcomes because you can't just accept the outcome.
Right, right.
Because you
Yep,
can't accept it, you have to point and blame somebody. You're blaming yourself, and like that whole cycle perpetuates more anguish.
yep,
So, like, one, how can we find acceptance and peace for what is? And also, how can we find forgiveness and acceptance for all versions of ourselves
yeah,
through points in time? How
yeah,
can we kind of forgive? That's also an
yeah,
expression of love. But how is that fear of like our own goodness and that fear of our own enoughness being projected and onto this situation
yep,
and coming up as this story of like, oh, but maybe we are supposed to be
yeah,
together and maybe I am supposed to suffer. And
yeah,
how might that be
yep,
playing a role in this? Because
yep,
even to just see that and to love that part of yourself that's afraid of that and to invite love to show you the truth in that situation is gonna do some really big things.
yep, yep.
Ooh, wow, some big energy moving there.
Okay, tell them to
Um,
settle down. Tell them to settle down.
are we moving on from this, or is there anything else you want us to say on this? Oh my goodness. Hmm. Feels like there's this feeling of like hope they want you to remember to feel. Like if you really believe that your life is going to be good, like trust the twists and turns that even if there's again this quote unquote pain in the moment, that means that there's greater
Mhm.
love for you. Like the hope that it's only getting better and better and better through every
Yeah,
moment in time. Oh, this is right. When one of my friends was going through a breakup, really bad breakup, she had this quote or something that she shared with me that made such a big impact on her. She was like, if this felt like it was it and it didn't work out, then that must mean that there's something that's even better
Yeah. I love
than
that.
I could have ever imagined.
Yeah.
So even though you're like, oh, I felt like this was the one and I'd never felt this way before, and I had all these feelings and signs that this was going to be it, but the reality, how it's unfolding, is that it's not working out, then that means that there's something that
There's
feels
something more.
even better than
Yeah.
this thing that was the best that you've had so far.
Yeah.
How exciting and hopeful is that? You know?
Exactly. And, going back to what we talked about earlier about purpose, right? So over the last 2 years of healing from my physical issues, I was healing the mental and the emotional issues. And one of the things that I kept coming back to were these two words, extravagant hope. And I realized that from the time I was a tiny little girl, I have had extravagant hope. And it nearly got beat out of me, a few times.
Mm-hmm.
But I always came back to that extravagant hope that there was something else.
Mm-hmm.
There was more in this lifetime. There was there was supposed to be more, you know? And I know, like, uh, this isn't relationship related, but it still is how I felt in relationship. But I think it's the easiest way for me to describe it is that when I got sick really quickly. So I went from being a very successful salesperson in Silicon Valley to being on full disability,
Mm-hmm.
like within 13 months.
Mm-hmm.
And I stayed there for 21 years. And I would go through the day in extreme debilitating pain. And I would go to bed and feel like I can't do this again. And I would wake up every morning and I would think, maybe today's the day. Maybe today's the day I'm going to get healed. Maybe today's the day I'm going to find the medicine or the doctor or the program and I would go to bed and I would be so exhausted from the pain and from
Mm-hmm.
smiling and pretending like it was okay. Right. But I
Mm-hmm.
would wake up the next morning and I would think, maybe today's the day. Maybe today's the day. And um, so that hope that's there for me, I realize that's been the theme of my life, is that extravagant hope. You might not be able to tell now with the tears and the red nose, but truthfully, that has been kind of the theme of my life. Like,
Mm-hmm.
today's the day. Today's the day we find out what will help my son. Today's the day my relationship with my daughter will heal. Today's the day I'll find the person that I meant to love forever. Right?
Mm-hmm.
That thing, that kind of hope. Today, my mom will be okay. You know,
Mm-hmm. And
so
and I feel like offering something in that, which
sure.
I feel like will resonate with where you're at now. Having that kind of hope that, like, today will be the day that all those things happen. I feel like a really powerful shift that can occur whenever at your journey it
Yeah.
happens, because that's when it's right, is the empowerment piece of how powerful you are to create your own reality, and that you're
Right.
not just waiting
Yeah.
for life to come rescue you, that
Yep.
you're creating it. So a
Right.
very subtle shift in those questions is, I
Yes.
wonder how it's going to happen today.
Yeah.
I wonder how my mom is going to be okay today. I
Yep.
wonder how I'm going to find the person I was always meant to love, which is really yourself. Sorry to like kill the punchline for you,
Yeah.
but it's always how, or like, I wonder how the thing my, like, and then I feel like that puts us in an attitude of not only of
Yeah.
where are there opportunities for our own actions to generate it, but it
Yep.
also puts us in a mindset of when circumstances are supposedly going wrong. Like,
Right.
how is this, if I believe that every circumstance is supporting me getting to what I want, if
Yeah.
I'm generating this reality, then how is what's happening getting me there?
Getting me
Like,
there.
that's
Exactly.
that's a totally different mindset than like, oh, I hope it happens
Yeah.
today. And
Yeah.
then like, oh, I guess it just didn't come. And I
Yeah.
just had a day of misery, or
Right.
like shit just happened to me, or it was a bad day, or I'm an
Yeah.
unlucky person. Like, it completely shifts your experience
Yeah.
to where you're actively looking for how it's getting you from where
What
you
point
are.
A to point B? Right.
Yes, like how you are
Yeah.
getting yourself there and how you're co-creating with the universe to get there, because you believe
Yep.
that the universe
Yes.
is helping you get there, even
Yeah.
in moments that feel sticky
Yeah.
and feel hard. Like,
Yep.
how is this situation helping get me to what I want? You know?
And that's where I've been the last 2 years. That's what I've learned, is that the extravagant part comes from it will I can do the things I need to do to get to that place. You know, I can be responsible for myself, and I don't have to wait for somebody else to rescue me, to help me, to fix me. And for me in my physical healing journey, that's what I learned, was that it was about me and the things I was doing. I was doing so many of the right things. I just needed guidance to get them in the right order. Right.
Mm.
And it's the same, I think, with the mental, the emotional, the spiritual part, is that I was doing a lot of the right things. I just wasn't quite, I didn't quite have the right order. Like I didn't have
Mm.
the path, right?
Oh, I
I
love
needed
it.
somebody to give me the guide, a little bit of guidance.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you
Oh,
100%, because I think, and that's the hopelessness of having extravagant hope, is that you don't know how to get there, right? You pray, you beg, you cry, you want, you plead, you journal, you do all those things, but you don't know what it takes to get to that spot, right? But it always takes you figuring out who you are, and you have to do the work. You have to do the work.
and
You
believing
have to do
too.
the work.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
also believing that the answer is not somehow outside of you, that you're
right,
like waiting to come to you.
right.
And again, I mean, this is like a whole other topic, but I'll just speak from my own personal experience. I also grew up in a very like dogmatically religious thing,
Mhm.
and a lot of the rhetoric, like the messaging, the subliminal messaging under that, is that somebody else has to give you the answers because you don't
Yeah,
have the
because you don't
answers.
have them. Yeah,
Yes, and that builds in this belief that honestly, because our whole like country culture is built on a lot of principles that come from that,
yeah,
the messaging is echoed in other places that
everywhere.
have nothing to do with religious stuff, is that
Right.
like you are not inherently good enough. It takes somebody else making you good enough, and it takes somebody else giving you the answers in order
Yeah,
for you to do something that's good or trustworthy. Like
yeah,
that's a lot of subliminal messaging under some religious stuff that I just
yeah,
think is so unfortunate. I
yeah,
think it keeps people in a really disempowered state. Um, so to be able to say like, yes, I want the answers, but like I know I have them.
yeah,
I know I have everything that I need to remember them, to
yeah,
attract them. Like the answer, like it's not something else, like it's not an
yeah, I know.
external
Yeah,
thing. You know what I mean? Like it's that
yeah.
that's that very subtle shift that like,
It's that knowing inside of you.
yeah, that trust in
Yeah.
yourself, that belief in yourself, that knowing in yourself 100%. Well, I have one last question that I feel like we're going to leave. I feel like this is going to be its own part, and it's going to be
Okay.
about addressing, and well, you guys will see whatever the title is that comes to me, but I feel like something about navigating the fears and like the endings of relationships is, it feels like has encompassed this part of it. And I feel like this needs to be its own moment. But
Okay.
before we end it, you had said something before that went right along with one of the questions I have, where, because we have this expectation and belief that marriage, or even not marriage, you can think, any sort of partnership that you get into that you envision being long-term and committed and all that kind of stuff. But we'll just say marriage to make it easy to kind of
Okay.
cover that. That marriage is a forever relationship. Like that's what it is. The definition of marriage, the purpose of marriage is that it is forever. I would propose that maybe we consider if that definition really serves us and if that's really true and if that really works for us. I think what you said, that that be a marriage relationships? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Are there things that are so beautiful about if that happens?
Yeah.
Absolutely. But I don't know that I think that that is what marriage is, or like the definition of marriage, or like the purpose of marriage myself. And I also wanted to pose this question to you. Like, if that wasn't the definition we worked off of, that marriage equals a relationship that has to last forever, no matter what, it's forever, so make it happen or fail. Like
Yeah.
if there
Yeah.
was a
Yeah.
different definition to what marriage was, what do we think that that would be? So I don't know if you want to answer that first, if you want me to answer it first to give you a minute to think about it, we can go whichever way.
You go first. I kind of, I have, I mean, I've thought about it because you sent it to me. So, but you go
Okay.
ahead first and then I'll tell you.
What feels true for me, um, is that marriage is absolutely, and again, or other relationships are committed relationship where
Mhm.
you both are aligned with your intention, um, to like be together long term,
Mhm.
right? Like you're both invested, committed into the work that takes. I personally think that marriage is like honoring and loving your partner in the context of this committed and intimate romantic relationship, through as many iterations of who you will become as is right, as feels like aligned,
Mhm.
right? For as long as it feels aligned and in support of both of the individuals' best, happiest, healthy selves to stay together is how long the marriage will stay together. And the
Mhm.
commitment to each other to actively participate and making that happen for as long as it can happen, as long as it feels like it should happen. Like that to me feels like marriage.
Yeah.
And I say that as somebody who is married.
Right. And
Been
loves
married
her husband dearly.
very much. I've been with him 8
Mhm.
years and we've been married 4. And to me, that also means accepting that there might come a point in time where it does not feel right for us to continue to be in a relationship. That for whatever reason, if like our values have changed fundamentally, or if something with one of us has changed where it does not feel like it's truly healthy and supportive, and we've done what we can to see if there is a way to stay on the same page and we're not on the same page. And I am accepting the possibility that that might be true, because what feels more important than forcing us to be together is
Mhm.
that we are both honoring our own knowing about what it takes for us both individually to be happy and healthy.
Yeah.
And our commitment is to see, can that happen with us being together?
Yeah.
That's the commitment, right? But the
Yeah.
more important thing than us again forcing the relationship is that like are we being stewards to our own health and happiness, you
Mhm.
know? And I think marriage is just this wonderful opportunity to like constantly be checking in and evolving with what does it look like for us to stay on the same page while we're evolving and growing into what it looks like for us to be our happiest and healthiest
Yeah.
selves.
So for you and I, there's about what, 32 years difference, right? In our age.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. It's about 32 years different. So I was raised in a very different, culturally, very different way than you. And I was raised in a family society where marriage was intended to be forever and everyone stayed regardless.
Mhm.
So there's someone in our family, someone I know very well that was in a marriage for 40 plus years. The marriage should never have happened. And it should have ended very early on since it did happen, but it didn't. So 4 decades later, both parties very unhappy, very unfulfilled, made a great appearance on the outside,
Mhm.
but on the inside, both very lonely and empty and didn't work. And then one of them passed away, and the other one is left to figure out their life in their 60s
Mm.
with 4 decades of heartache.
Mm.
So, do I think marriage should be forever? You know, I think it would be the ideal. It would be great if you could be with someone and love them your whole life and they
Mhm.
loved you back.
Mhm.
But I think it's wrong to stay in a marriage where you are not valued and appreciated, where you're not treated fairly, where you're not introduced, where you're not loved on, where you're not made a priority. I
Or
don't
you're
care
not
what
an
it looks
equal
like,
partner.
right?
Mhm.
I don't
Or
care what it
whatever
looks
that
on
means.
the outside.
Mhm.
You know, I don't think that, like in my marriage, I think my first husband and I should have divorced probably right after my daughter was born. Not long after. I think
Yeah.
that was when he was done. And he held on, I know, because of my daughter and because he wanted to do the right thing.
Mm.
But what it did was destroyed both of us. And then in
Mhm.
the end, it hurt our children so badly. And I didn't leave because I didn't think I could,
Mhm.
right? Because marriage was forever.
Mhm.
So I would like to believe the ideal that when you get married, it's meant to last forever, but I
Yeah.
don't think it's practical.
Yeah.
And my experience is that people stay way too long. They don't get the right help soon enough. They go
Mhm.
for help at the end, right?
Mhm.
So I would say to you, if you're in a relationship, if you're married, if you're in a long-term relationship with someone and you love them and things are starting to go wrong, get help then.
Mhm.
Because if you wait till the end, it's not going to help you.
Yeah.
It's not going to help you.
Yeah.
You've already, it's too much water under the bridge. It's very rare that you can pull back after years and years of heartache.
Yeah.
Because I know that's what happened in this relationship I was saying about. Towards the end of that man's life, he had said he had tried to make it right, but it'd been
Mhm.
4 decades,
Yeah.
4 decades of heartache, and
Yeah.
not and a good man, a
Yeah.
good man and a good woman, two really lovable people, but
Yeah.
they just could not make it work.
Yeah. Just not aligned.
The world
Yeah.
thinks they made it work. The world thinks they made it work,
Yeah.
the outside, but on the inside, it was not that way. And it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
It's
And I'll just
heartbreaking.
say too that even because I relate to a lot of what you say because I feel like the community I was raised in was very
Mhm.
similar to
Yeah.
yours.
Yes, it
And
was.
even that concept of like what is the right thing to do implies that there is a standard. And
Hmm.
I think it's so important for us to like take a step back and look at what that standard is and feel like if that's actually true. Because if he
Hmm.
had a different definition of what the right thing to do was, to do right by the situation, then maybe it would have been him being honest with himself, him doing the work to make sure that he was bringing
Oh,
in
right, right.
you know what I mean?
Yes, I know
Like,
what you're
or
saying. Yeah, I
like,
agree with you.
like
Right.
it's all a matter of like, what are your beliefs underneath it
So I
that
should
kind
have
of drive
gone
it?
right thing. I should have said
Yes.
right thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Quote, in
like do
quotes.
right by every, and
Yeah.
not to, and
Yeah.
I don't say it to criticize your story doll. I just say
No, I
that that's
know.
a wonderful example of how it's important to like really look at what we're assuming and labeling things to
Right.
be in this situation. Like I married my husband because I think that I have the best chance of having a very long and happy life where we get to continue to evolve together, where that possibility of us getting on the same page through all these different chapters, like I
Yeah.
feel like I had the best possibility of doing that with him. I felt like in my gut,
Yeah.
that like this was the person that I should
Yeah. Should be
take.
with.
And yeah, that you kind of take that risk of like,
Yeah.
well, we'll see if this is,
Yeah.
and so I definitely feel like that's, that's something that I think would be so beautiful. And I want that to happen. I see that as a possibility, or else I wouldn't have married him. But I do acknowledge that there is a little bit of difference in the sense that like it feels important to me to accept the possibility that you're afraid of so that you're not driven by the fear of that being the case. You know what I mean?
Right.
Which is
Right.
something I think we're going to talk about in another episode
Hmm.
after this. But I just felt like it was the right to end this part of the conversation on like how are we really defining what marriage is, what a successful committed relationship is? Is it just inherently staying together just because somebody said that that was the right thing?
Right.
Or is it the quality of the relationship and also the allowing
Yeah.
of it to change when it's been revealed that whatever that relationship dynamic looks
Yeah.
like isn't really in service to both people or the situation
Yeah.
involved?
And it's really about understanding why you want to get married. Like,
Hmm.
what is what is the purpose, right? Why are you doing it? Because we think of it as it's so romantic, right? It's so romantic to get married. We get proposed to, we get, you have this wonderful wedding and a honeymoon and all these wonderful things happen. But the truth is you live with this person. They leave their socks and their underwear on the floor. They don't always put the dishes away. They really make you mad sometimes because they watch football like 42 hours a week, maybe, or you don't clean your car and their car is spotless, right? I mean, you have all, there's like, that's silly, but it's like, there's all these little things. They're day by day things, right?
Hmm.
That's what marriage is. Marriage isn't this big lovey-dovey thing. Marriage is doing life with somebody.
Hmm.
That's how I see it anyway. It's
Yeah.
doing life with somebody. Is it romantic and wonderful? Yeah, it is. But it's also mundane and boring. But it doesn't mean that it's a bad marriage because you've had a boring week or
Hmm.
because you're going through a rough time.
Mm.
And that's what we're going to talk about next time.
Yes, exactly. So thank you everybody for listening to this part. And I don't know if this is going to be the first episode or come after, but on our other conversation, you will have already heard or will hear more about this. So thanks everybody for listening.